Well, I have a quick story before I get started on my presentation. This is a really happy community. Do you know what they're doing back there? They danced. As I came up on the stage, they were dancing, trying to send good vibes my way onto the stage. I went to lunch. Yeah, and they're good dancers too, by the way. I was going to lunch and I couldn't quite find the Thai place that I was supposed to meet Hillary and a couple other guys. And a couple of ladies came up and said, "You look lost, can we help you?" I'm like, "I can't find this one Thai place." I didn't even know the name. And so anyways, short story, they walked me right to it. And laughing the whole time, I was talking about my Midwestern roots. We're having a great time. So this Bend community, really special, tight-knit, really content. I've had a really good experience today since I've been here. So yeah, thank you. Actually, it's claps to you, right? Applause to you. All right, we should get started. Oh, I clicked. Okay, so I am the Chief Wrangler of the Field Innovation Team. It was a title that came from an Oakland artist. I wear cowboy boots a lot. Like to just have fun. I wear yoga pants pretty much all the time. I'm wearing yoga pants right now. I wear them in disasters. I've worn them in the National Response and Coordination Center. I even wore them when President Obama was like, "Thank you for your work." And my mom looked at the picture and she's like, "Are you wearing yoga pants?" Yeah, I am. I wear yoga pants and I wear cowboy boots. And today it's octopus socks. But yeah, so I'm the Wrangler. I wrangle a lot of different talent in disasters. But before I became the Chief Wrangler, I have an interesting past. And I thought it kind of correlated a lot with what Jason, and it resonated with me, what he was talking about with gun violence. So my start in emergencies was not a pretty one. In fact, I didn't know I was about to be in one. It was February 14th, 2008, and I'm a law student. It's the middle winter in Illinois, as you know, Jason. It's cold in Illinois, and so I'm freezing. I'm in the library. I'm getting ready for this moot court argument. Oh, no, it was an appellate brief, which is even more boring than a moot court argument. So anyways, we're sitting in there. We're getting ready. I'm going to get done by 6 o'clock so I can go to have my date and have a great time. When what I think I hear is fireworks just pinging across the street. But what I can't quite figure out is, why are fireworks going off in the middle of the day? But in my mind, I had to sort of rationalize the noise, right? Because it was very, it was alarming, but it just couldn't be that, right? Well, it was that. It was an active shooter, a guy named Steve Kazmierczak, and he was unleashing on a lecture hall across the street from where I was. And we were suddenly in the throes of our own disaster. And I have to just give you a little background. I've dealt with lots of things like genocide. I've been in a lot of long-term recovery efforts. But up to this point, I hadn't personally been in my own emergency. And I had no idea what to do. So that was the day on that February 14th, 2008, that it changed my life. It changed the course of the direction I decided to go in my career path. And so now I just run around the world going into disasters and making sure that people never feel the way that I felt in that library on that cold winter day. So FIT, what do? Our mission statement is to empower humans to create cutting-edge disaster solutions. Empower humans to create them. So my background, besides going in and having that active shooter situation, I come from a long line of incident command, emergency management, very traditional response. You know, like if they tell you to run into an active shooter situation, run into an active bomb area, you just say, how fast, right? Like I was used to that command and control, very, very hierarchical, and that's what we did. So when I came to FEMA just a few years later, after the active shooter, I was their chief innovation advisor. And a lot of folks would tell me, well, you're the government. You've got to save us. You've got to help us, and you got to make this right. And early on, we realized that that's not the right design. That's not going to work. We're in it together, and we've got to co-create solutions. But it was the designers, and I'm going to show some examples, who helped to change that attitude. They actually changed the infrastructure in Hurricane Sandy and the continual border crisis we're having in the US-Mexico border. Even in Nepal, we did work there. Designers like yourself are actually taking the paradigm and you're shifting it. You're shifting the mindset to, I'm a victim, to I'm a survivor. So it's a huge, huge difference from when I started. There's actually a video that's supposed to play next. There we go. Thank you, Matt.
From the National Weather Service, a vigorous frontal system will bring significant snowfall tonight through Wednesday night. Winter storm warning in effect from 4 a.m. Wednesday to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time Thursday.
So the story about this slide is I don't intentionally try to do this, but I never give a segue for anyone, including Matt back there, who's doing an amazing job. And I was thinking about it as the video was playing, why I do that. And I don't think I had a reason up until I watched the whole thing. The actions speak louder than the words. So I think I just say, slide 3, video. But you can see that these are folks like you, designers, roboticists, artists, cartoonists, others who are coming in and building out solutions with us right in a disaster. We're not doing it after, we're not doing it before, we're doing it like right as it strikes. So the first example I'm going to give you is one from way back during Hurricane Sandy, but it's a great example of how design played an integral role to creating a survivor-centric focus. So just to raise a hands, anybody experience Hurricane Sandy? No. Yeah, it was challenging. It was only a category 3, so it wasn't the biggest hurricane we've ever had. But it hit some highly urban, dense areas on the East Coast. In fact, I had actually never been physically in a hurricane until that one, and I was in the National Response and Coordination Center. For those who don't know what that center is about, basically when the president goes up to speak, he's in 2 places when there's something that happens. One is he's in the Situation Room, and he's telling you about a situation, and that is at the White House. The second place he is he's in the National Response and Coordination Center, and he's telling you about something bad that's happening or about to happen. Either place, I hope that you're ready, because it's usually not a good thing. It's either obviously a Mother Nature disaster or other, maybe Homeland Security. So anyways, we were all in the National Response and Coordination Center, including the president, as Hurricane Sandy is coming over us. And it's my first time, right? I actually am not from the East Coast, I'm from the Midwest, I'm from Wisconsin. So we get tornadoes and floods, once in a while, forest fire, but not hurricanes. But this particular example was where designers they were at the helm. They still don't get enough credit for what they did. There was approximately 50 centers open at this point in New York and New Jersey, which is a lot of centers actually to have open. But this is a place where people could go, survivors could go and get assistance. They'd register for aid, and they could go through the FEMA individual assistance process. They could go to SBA to get a loan for their business. They go to HUD to look at how they can help repair their homes. There's a whole system. And then of course there's the local resources as well, the city and others. So these disaster recovery centers were actually pretty slow and cumbersome. If you have 50 centers open and people are standing in long lines and they're going from chair to chair to chair, and it's taking a really long time to get through and get your assistance, that's not very survivor-centric. So our little FIT team said, well, what if we brought in NYITP students? What if we brought folks from Frog Design, What if we brought volunteers who have that kind of UX experience? Let's bring them into the centers and have them spend some time just observing the physical flow of survivors through the centers. And so that's what we did. They literally went in, they looked at it, and we said, let's come up with a new way to do this. Let's do it now. Not the next disaster, let's do it right now. So after they spent a couple days kind of synthesizing their reports and their situation and what they saw as being the challenges, we made these simple changes. Now this came much later, this nice graphic that was designed by Frog, but the things in these graphics were done very quickly. So we found challenges with getting people intercepted right away, because a lot of times you would go into the center and there's just all these resources, like where do I go? Simple thing, put a person there to help triage. A designer thinks that way, not necessarily an emergency manager who's trying to figure out how they're going to get all the assistance out to folks. So that was one thing that really helped. A second thing was we got this great idea to mobilely register people, which again to you is probably like, well, why aren't you doing that already? But we had never in that history, when I worked at the agency, mobilely registered people at their homes. You could really cut down the numbers by physically going over with a FEMA Corps member, they're about 18 to 24, and having them register on the iPad and then upload that to the cloud. So just really cool things that happened because these designers rethought the disaster recovery centers, and from that it made the process flow much, much better. Besides the Hurricane Sandy, a more recent example is the US-Mexico border crisis. Just a show of hands again, who knows what's going on the US-Mexico border crisis with particularly children? Because I can give you the long or the short. I'll give you the middle, how about that? Because we have about half and half. There's about 147,000 people who've come over the border, the US-Mexico border, since 2011. I think that's actually a pretty modest estimate, but that's what we have right now. Out of all of those folks, 50% of them are unaccompanied minors, children, who are 13 to 17, and another 25% of that is kids under 12. It's a lot of kids without parents coming over the border. Now, we, as a team, went out actually to San Antonio in 2014 and 2015 to redesign the education system, what they were receiving when they were coming over, to try and help, see what we could do to help with the influx of children those 2 summers. And our predominant demographic was Latin America. So you had Honduran, El Salvadorian, and Guatemalan children, predominantly, again, young boys who were used to some pretty violent situations, now here in San Antonio and wondering, where do I go next? So we partnered up with an organization who kind of looked after them while things were being sorted out. And were they going back to their home country? Were they staying in the United States? What was going on? But they needed some new educational tools. So we brought in gaming designers, which is really, really cool. And I should probably just, it's okay, flip to the next slide after this. But they designed different curriculum. And besides designing some of the games I'm going to talk about in Nepal, I'm going to start with what we did with the robotics piece. So we realized a lot of these kids were into mechanics. They were wondering applicable trade and skill that they could use when they became 18 and older. So we started having them assemble solar-powered robots. We got them involved in using the arts. So they were drawing out the robots and then we were creating them. We brought female drone operators to show them how to operate drones. We just did anything we could to get them to think about technology. We even had a little blue furry robot that a designer in San Francisco came up with called Romibo, typically used for kids with autism, but we used it as a language translator, which was pretty cool because I didn't know this, but there is I don't even know how many dialects in Guatemala. There's a ton of dialects besides Spanish that the kids speak. So it was very impossible to have everybody speaking the same language. We ran a robotics petting zoo. So I'd never run a robotics petting zoo. I don't know about you, but then I've never run a robotics petting zoo in a border crisis. So it was an interesting thing. So we brought all kinds of robots crawling, walking, talking. We were talking about disassembling them. We reassembled them. We brought all these different creatures, and the kids got to just have a heyday. It was pretty much mayhem in this gymnasium as all these robots are flying and crawling and talking and interacting with the kids. But what we did notice is that these kids are not so far off from the kids who've grown up in the US. They learn really fast. And they've had to, right? Because they took the Bestia down from all the way, actually they've come from Latin America, so they've gone through Latin America, through Mexico, and into the United States. And for those who don't know what the Bestia is, it's their kind of like their slang term for the beast, because lots of people, lots of kids get killed by the train. So anyways, but this is a cool story because we had these, again, these designers, these roboticists, these people working together to coalesce around a robotics petting zoo in the border crisis. And you'll see this picture up here by the solar-powered crab, and this woman this young lady has her feet pointed towards it because she's very proud. She combined a couple of different complex concepts together very fast, having no robotics experience. So after they were submerged into the robotics petting zoo, then they drew their own robots. And her robot connected artificial intelligence and sensors and analytics all together. This is a young lady who does not have any experience with robotics and technology and comes from Honduras. And in the photo that, I wish I would have gotten a closer one, but it's a hand, and she called it the helping hand. So it's a helping hand robot for kids in crisis, she said, to help them. So we started asking her, so why the helping hand? What does it do? Like, how does it work? And she explained to us that data comes through the fingertips, because that acts as the sensors, and then goes right into the middle of the hand. And as you can probably see a bit, there's a red heart in the middle of the hand. It takes all of this data, it does some analytics within the hand, and then it synthesizes how it's going to help the human in crisis. Thus, it's called the helping hand. So it's pretty phenomenal to have this young girl who has no technology background having a couple of hours in a robotics petting zoo to then come up with that concept and then layer that. The focus is on empathy, right? So she's focusing on future survivors of crisis because she's going through that right now. And just to add to the pressure, she also doesn't know at this point, this young lady didn't know whether she was going to be taken back to Honduras, which is a highly violent, systemically violent country, or if she was going to stay in the US. So you can imagine how confusing that time was, and she had such a clarity of thought. So again, designers helped create this. They helped create this environment where kids learned about exponential technologies. In this photo, it's important to know that we learned in our second deployment. Our first deployment was just a lot of fun. We hit hundreds of kids from Latin America. We had a blast. We got to really design for that. But then, again, the design community said, bravo, but think about it. You designed for these kids, but what about the kids that are coming through now? Like, is there a sustainability plan? And we were like, we didn't even think about that. We just were happy the robotics petting zoo worked out. We were happy everybody got what they needed done. We were happy the kids learned something and had some critical thought behind it. But the second deployment, designers came in and they helped us start working with staff and the administration to change the culture. So they were now embedding the techniques and the education within the system so that when we did leave, when this little fit team would take off back to our daily lives, there was continuity. And so rather than hundreds of kids, thousands of kids could learn some of these cool, great little educational practices. So that was the second deployment, and it was very successful. You can see actually two of the staff members, three of them, actually running the exercises. So by the second deployment, we were there to support, we were there to help if something like broke down, we were there to help to push the envelope, but they were leading the exercises in the curriculum, and that was a huge, huge step for us. Robotics petting zoo, I kind of talked about it, but we took it up a notch. So we got a call from Austin, Texas, and they said, we heard about this robotics petting zoo you did with the kids. It was really cool. Do you think you could design another one for Austin? And I thought, yeah, we totally can. So I said yes. But you know, I didn't get the details to what they were actually asking for. And when I say yes, I'm from the Midwest, I just go do it. I have to do it. It's like it's my word, I've got to keep it. So a couple weeks later, we get this information package in the mail, and my creative director's like, Desi, what did you promise? What did you say yes to? I said, oh, it's like a small festival in Austin, like no big deal. She's like, well, actually it's South by Interactive, and it's 30,000 people, and we're used to dealing with 100 children. So we realized again, we needed to get our design community to think about how we're going to scale this operation to hit 30,000 people. Well, it ended up being, I would think, one of the most exciting and most interesting things that ran at Interactive last year. But it wasn't without the help of designers to problem solve very quickly to what we had then promised for. And then it hit an even larger community. And now I actually see a lot of people running robotics petting zoos around the country and around the world. And for the most part, I see them with social good intent, which is like the idea behind it. So there's one actually running in Colorado around entrepreneurial spirit, and they seem to be doing some social good. So I'm hoping that that continues that trend, and that it doesn't just become a trade show. Secondly, besides border crisis, we just, I know you're very aware of what's going on, especially in California, but they've had like a multi-year drought. It's been pretty extreme. In fact, I just got married, and out in Paso Robles, where there's actually one active nuclear power plant that's near two fault lines, Hayward and San Andreas. That's the Diablo Canyon fault. It's the Diablo Canyon power plant, and there's a fault line called Diablo Canyon as well. But anyways, right there, everything is just golden. There's absolutely no water on a lot of these lands, especially Central California, everywhere. There's wildfires going on, and it's very extreme. So the Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom, came to fit. He said, you know, you've run earthquake future casts with us. We really needed to design a do tank, which is our version of creating something that you actually do. It's not just talk about it, like let's actually create a solution and make it happen around drought. And I thought, wow, you know, we've been in so many extreme disasters. I don't think we've ever dealt with a drought. And so we brought, again, designers together for a day with Gavin to come up with solutions to this. They had one day to come up with these solutions. And they came up with a plethora of amazing ones. But the ones that really stand out is a group came up with a technology that helps with desalinization of water. And that was something that, again, designers created. They're in the process of now getting funding. They've got a big boat that they're going to have. Their biggest problem right now is getting past the Coastal Commission. But that's a for real solution that is probably likely going to get implemented if it can get past the regulations. A second one was an art installation. There were a group of burners who were probably getting a bit excited because this is June. They're thinking about Burning Man that, you know, I think it's in September. So they created an art installation that mirrored the analytics of water sensors in the Bay Area. Their challenge right now, though, is to figure out, there's only some communities that have this, and connecting with it's called a water czar. They need to get a little bit more data, but they actually have the ability to do this. So that's another solution that could create situational awareness. And then there was a gaming group who came up with an online gaming about going vegan and the importance of watching where your products come from. So there was just a lot of designers behind this, and it catapulted into a second session in Sacramento. And now you've got a few different groups out there who are in the process of working with the Lieutenant Governor to implement the solutions. So that's pretty cool, and that's all designers. I think I was the only non-designer of the entire group. There was the Nepal earthquakes. So we've talked about drought, we've talked about border crisis, we talked about Hurricane Sandy. We haven't really talked about earthquakes, and you guys are very familiar with earthquakes because you've got Cascadia, subduction fault line, right? You probably read the New Yorker article. I read it 3 times. It is intense. That being said, though, great to be aware, right? You always want to be a little bit on your toes when it comes to preparedness. Nepal was not on its toes for this. 8,000 deaths. Infrastructure very down. In June, they're getting ready for monsoon season. So you've got a whole disease spreading type of campaign that needs to go on now because everything is down. And 50,000 classrooms completely demolished. 50,000 classrooms. Those are some mega numbers. This is over a 7.8 and a 7.3 that hit in April and May. And then a whole lot of aftershocks after that. So you can see this is part of a relic in Kathmandu Valley. I happened to snap a shot right before we were about to deploy out. I thought, I need to get a couple of photos of what's going on the ground. Because some of our team members were virtual, wanted to know, what are you seeing? So we went to the Gorga district one day. And interestingly enough, you'll see there's women who are leading this effort. Again, from that sustainability workshop that we ran in the border crisis that designers helped to build, we realized that women or not women, but other people, survivors, teachers, people who are on the ground who aren't going to not leave, they're going to be there and sustain it and keep the continuum going, needed to be the ones leading the exercises. So we, again, designed so that people were put in positions of leadership roles, and we helped to support and create that space. So we created that space in Gorka, and actually this was during a day where I had part of the team negotiating the bamboo up top, working on temporary learning centers for those 50,000 classrooms that were destroyed. But we also had a group on the sort of in the bowl of Gorka, working with hundreds of kids on public awareness, public health, gaming. So what you see here is actually right before the 4.5 struck. So lots of aftershocks after earthquakes typically, and we just happened to hit a 4.5. Nobody was injured, no casualties. Some people didn't even notice it, because what happens when you're in enough earthquakes, you actually can kind of create a disimbalance in the liquid in your ear, and it's hard for you to know if the earth is not moving or not. And that's what happened to actually a lot of us. But these young ladies are running a public health gaming sort of simulation where it was developed by two improv artists from Chicago. And basically you get in a big circle, and there's someone in the middle. I don't know if you've ever played octopus tag, but it's kind of like octopus tag. And the person in the middle has diarrhea. And the true game, they made it up. And basically you have to try and tag someone as they run across the circle, which for kids, that's really fun and interactive, right? So as you start to tag people, they become an octopus in the middle with diarrhea, and they try to tag people. And the idea is to talk about tactile touch and personal hygiene. You have a lot of fun doing it, but you realize, oh, yeah, so we exchange hands, we shake hands. If we don't wash our hands, we can really spread this, and we're all going to be in the diarrhea circle. So it is a lot of fun. We had a really good time. But it's hard to tell it here. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day. It's the diarrhea circle. Yeah, you know that game. But anyways, so these kids got a lot of lessons in public health, because as the monsoon season is coming and infrastructure is down, you can imagine spread of disease. So again, designers coming up with ways to create public health gaming. This is just an adorable photo. So we built a lot. I don't know if I can say much more than that. I mean, but we built a lot of temporary learning centers, and I think I'm just going to let you look at that photo, and it's cute. This was another area we went to. It's called the Hammurabi District, or H-City, and you can see just hundreds of kids have shown up. So another area that we found a gap in was human trafficking. So there's already some human trafficking that happens between the borders of India and Nepal. But when the earthquake happened, that uptick went very, very high. And people were trying to solve it. They were like physically trying to solve it by interacting and sort of getting in there and making sure people didn't get trafficked, or walking the kids back from the school to their homes. But it's kind of nearly impossible to track hundreds of kids who've been displaced and put into relief centers. It really is. So we thought maybe we should empower them with the knowledge to understand not to go with strangers and to really be careful during this period. So we partnered with a group called Circus Kathmandu. And we brought amazing performers into our curriculum. So hundreds of kids are watching these acrobatic, amazing stunt devils do all these amazing actions in basically just a plaza circle. But what they didn't know is the history of these young performers. They were very young, they were in their 20s. They had been trafficked themselves. So they started this circus to bring awareness to others about not being trafficked and then end up in some sort of form of child slavery, and in this case it was performance as the child slavery. So cool idea, design performances around creating awareness, do it in a fun way, attract a huge audience, and then educate them in subtle hints and tips and off-the-cuff conversations so that they don't become a part of that statistic. This is just another photo of I really couldn't even get all the kids that would come to the programming. Like, we started with 200 or 300 kids each day, and it would just mushroom. I mean, we would go into a village, and all of a sudden it was like, how did all these, do all these kids, are they supposed to be in the building that used to exist here? Because there's a lot of kids. But we did a lot. So this is yet another example of doing performing arts and getting them kind of ready to be aware about human trafficking. The other really important thing is we wanted to have that individual personal touch, right? So we wanted to make sure that they knew we were there. We armed ourselves with a lot of Nepali women leaders. So you had these performers interacting, but then we had these young women, because there's a high demographic of women. Many of the young men go over to Abu Dhabi and Dubai to work. It's women who are able-bodied. They came in to supplement and make sure that they could hit and target groups of the kids during the performances, so there was a little bit more of that personal touch, which we really wanted to make sure happened, because it could become just a giant glob of kids just watching a performance. So there was that piece going through the underbelly. And then upcoming disaster preparedness. Well, we do a lot with design. So there's a lot I didn't talk about, but I wanted to talk about one since I've got a little bit of time, about a young lady who came to me. Her name's Margot. I just saw her because we ran this nuclear preparedness exhibit at Fleet Week, which if anybody wants to know anything about nuclear, I've got great stats. It's important that we start talking about it. This is just an off-the-cuff thing. We are not having this conversation, and as Hillary put it yesterday, it's one of the biggest threats to our nation. We've got to talk about it. So anyways, Margot came to man the exhibit, but has a design background, and she's now at Stanford. And she was telling me about her project that was generated off of her enthusiasm for disasters and how we could actually make her prototype smaller. But here's a young woman who's a designer who created a thing called disaster mesh with her buddy in France. And basically this concept, again, was to sprinkle nodes of mesh around fields and areas that were destroyed to amplify bandwidth. And it's actually kind of a brilliant concept, because the one thing that always goes down in disasters is communication. And my best example is in the Boston Marathon bombings. First thing to shut down when I was running back in to help set up the emergency operations center, like literally minutes after the bombs went off, what was down? It was communications, because everyone's getting on their phone and there's not enough bandwidth. What happened in Hurricane Sandy? Loved ones couldn't reach each other, so my guys are climbing up onto rooftops and putting mesh. So this young lady is actually sprinkling, in prototype right now, sprinkling seeds that act as nodes to allow to create a mesh, a net mesh around a disaster site. So again, another designer who's taking technology, taking disasters, she's applying it into this creative blend that is going to help the future survivors. So we've got a whole lot of stuff going on in regards to our own disaster preparedness, but one of the things that's going to be really important, especially this year, I can never predict if we're going to have hurricanes in the next couple of months. My prediction was actually I thought Miami was going to get hit this year, so we ran a Miami dew tank with designers all on gaming around urban flooding. There hasn't been a hurricane yet, but I'm going to say that today, and then tomorrow we're all going to get on the news and there's going to be like a Cat 5 that's headed to Miami. And in that case, I'll be on a plane to Miami. But yeah, so we run a lot of things around the country, just disaster dew tanks. But the crux of what we do, and what I've learned, as I'm truly not from the design world, designers play an integral role in everything we do. They helped create our framework for response. They help to develop the disaster preparedness tools that we use today. A lot of the ideas that are up and coming and are hybrid with our nanotechnologists, our roboticists, and our designers are the best ones. So what I guess I'm telling you is I'm trying to appeal to your senses and say that you play a role, and since you're in a very seismically active area, although you're not on the coast here in Bend, which is great, you still have fault lines. Think about how you can help in a disaster. Think how you can help fit. If I can connect you to someone cool and you guys can go off to launch an aerostat project that is designed to help responders expedite their search and rescue efforts, let me know how I can help. And I think that's really about it. I am never on time, and I've literally gone a minute. I have to go, but I want to thank you for your time. Yeah.